just 26 letters, we can create whole worlds that actually science says that people inhabit those worlds in the sense that as far as the brain is concerned, it is as if you're actually experiencing that. For example, when you read about someone jumping, the motor cortex, the part of your brain that's responsible for balance and actually action, is stimulated in more or less the same way. It's absolutely incredible, yeah. Long before virtual reality, this was a portable virtual reality for the brain and mind.
So no wonder I become a 12 years old.
No wonder you become 12 years old, absolutely. And that's actually very key because I think all great writers understand that what they're actually doing is taking real emotion, authentic feeling, putting it onto words, and that's translated into that same feeling for the person who's reading it. And that can survive across generations, across time. It is absolutely a miracle, actually. Maya, what do you feel? Have you had to change your writing style, or have you had to adapt consciously to the changing environment in terms of technology?
I think definitely, you were talking about the way we read. Have you ever read the book The Shallows by Nick Carr? It's, I think, for parents and educators, a fascinating book to read because it looks at how the brain is changing as a result of all the technology we have. And certainly kids' attention spans are contracting. But books are a good way to expand attention spans. So I think 8 seconds is very low. And certainly as parents and educators, we can increase attention spans by getting kids to read. Put away the technology, at least for a while, get kids to read. I think that's so important in terms of not just accommodating attention spans, but increasing attention spans, working to increase those attention spans. So that I think is a huge thing that teachers and parents need to do very consciously. Get your kids to read to increase attention spans. And think about how much technology they use, because so many kids today are actually quite addicted. I tell my students, put away your phones, and they're in shock. They're like, what do you mean? How can I put away my phone? Because I teach high school, and they are so used to having those phones with them all the time. So certainly the technology is changing things. I also wanted to talk a little bit about just stress levels among adolescents and children today, which I think is, again, a result of so much technology, so much stimulation, hyperstimulation. And I think books are a good way to counteract that, because I have students who sometimes are very anxious, sometimes very depressed about things, and somehow when they read books, they're able to escape into this other world, as you're talking about, able to have empathy for other characters, and it is able to bring their anxiety levels down. So I think even from an emotional well-being perspective, the technology, the digital world is affecting children so much, and books are a good way to counterbalance that and reduce anxiety levels. So often I have students who tell me when they're very anxious, they read a book, suddenly they're in this other parallel universe, and they no longer feel that anxiety. Or they are able to empathize with a child who's going through something similar to them. Their parents are getting divorced, whatever it might be in that book, and that helps them realize they're not alone. It helps them realize that that they're part of this larger human experience. So I think in so many ways, books can actually counterbalance so much of what technology is doing to our brains on a socio-emotional level, on a cognitive level. And technology has its benefits, obviously, right? It can be wonderful for kids. They have so much access to research and information, but it also has its sort of downsides. And books and I think nature, both are great ways to combat and counterbalance those downsides. So.
Thank you, Maya. I think that's very, very aptly put. You touched upon a very important topic, I think, something that concerns educators, teachers, parents, which is the rise of stress, anxiety, and depression among adolescents, teenagers, and so on. And you're absolutely right. Research tells us that when we use the phone frequently, for example, or the internet, what it is doing is it's fragmenting our attention. And it's clearly established now that there's no such thing as multitasking. That when people think they're multitasking, what they're actually doing is rapidly shifting attention from one thing to another, and that might give you the illusion of multitasking, but it's easy to check whether you can multitask. Just try counting backwards and try to read at the same time. It's just not possible. And what they find is that when our attention fragments like that, it actually affects the sense of self. And somebody else, I think Kavita mentioned that today our kids lead such busy lives, And as someone said, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And for children to really know who they are, they shouldn't always be doing something. They should also have time to pause, reflect, savor the experience of life without life being fragmented into little bits, which is actually their own self-fragmenting, causing anxiety. And many years ago in our own ancient texts, they describe an anxious mind as the monkey mind, right? The mind which is anxious, well, actually they said everybody's mind, more or less, is like a monkey mind. And not just any ordinary monkey, a drunken monkey that's been stung by a scorpion and on a hot tin roof. So it's an incredibly active mind. And so what we have found in research is that when people start reading, it engages the mind in a meditative way. The child now comes back, is now in touch with their own although you're using words, what you're also doing is getting in touch with visceral, non-verbal experience. Because your identity is not based on your thoughts, it's really based on a non-verbal experience. So just an experience of who are you, what do you feel? And our children really don't get that anymore. And every time they look at the internet and you look at something quickly, whether it's text or image, it does something to the brain. It sends a little reward chemical in the brain because the brain likes novelty. So in a sense, we have competing neural systems, one part of the brain which is trying to push kids into seeking novelty, but the other part needs a little more discipline. And as you rightly said, this habit has to be established early. Once something is a habit, you don't have to think about it anymore. And as someone said, we are just a bundle of our habits. That's what we are. 90% of our life is not by conscious decision. It's just by sheer inertia. So by the time a kid is like 16 or 17, if you haven't established the habit, it's going to be really difficult. And so I think it's incredible what Neev is doing, this literary festival, which is, there's no point in doing literary fest. I mean, there is. Don't get me wrong. It's great to have literary festivals for adults also. But having said that, if we can start the excitement, encourage reading at an early age, it will profoundly shape not just each individual who learns to read, but think about the number of people each one of us influences as we're older. In my line of work as a psychiatrist, a lot of doctors don't like psychiatry because they find that unlike other fields of medicine, results are harder to get. However, what is profoundly satisfying as a psychiatrist is that when you help one person, you actually help the next generation. And similarly with teachers, similarly with what we are doing today. If we help one person read, then their child learns to read, then their children's children learn to read, and our whole society can be transformed by this. So I think it's really, really powerful, what's happening today.